Mexico's most famous UFO expert just made a startling statement about the presence of extraterrestrial life on Earth before the Mexican Congress. And this time, he had more than photographs to prove his point. Do we finally have physical proof of aliens on Earth? Or is it a publicity stunt and a man's last grab at relevance? Find out on this episode of the Mysteries of Latin America podcast. Hello, friends, and welcome to the Mysteries of Latin America podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Colon, and this week we report on some very exciting and potentially world-altering UFO and extraterrestrial news happening right here in Mexico. We'll talk about a very surprising announcement that was made in Mexico City, a shocking unveiling, and a very unusual turn the whole story is taken. As always, I'd like to thank you for listening to, sharing, and subscribing to the podcast, and I invite you to let everyone you know who loves a good story about the myths, legends, ancient science, monsters, beasts, paranormal activities, extraterrestrial phenomena, and all-around surreal things taking place in North, Central, South America, and the Caribbean that we bring you each week here on the podcast. So let's get to it. On September 12th, 2023, Jaime Maussan, journalist, television personality, and director of the Mexican TV program Tercer Milenio, Third Millennium, and long-established ufologist, addressed the Cámara de Diputados, in English known as the Chamber of Deputies of the Mexican Congress, and stood among other specialists to say that there's enough evidence to show that extraterrestrial life exists here on the planet, that we are being visited by non-human intelligence from the depths of the universe, and that we may soon be able to visit other universes. Now, the Chamber of Deputies in Mexico is very similar to the House of Representatives in the U.S. He said that new laws were needed, at least in Mexico to begin with, to guarantee safer conditions within Mexican airspace, to formally recognize unidentified aerial phenomena, increase research on the subject, and make those results transparent and accessible to everyone. Now, if the Mexican Congress were to pass this type of legislation, it would be the first country in the world to legally recognize the existence of alien life on Earth, so it's kind of a big deal. For those of you not familiar with Jaime Maussan, let's do a quick background check. Jaime Maussan is in his 70s, and since 1970, he's been a reporter and Mexican and Latin American personality for newspapers, magazines, TV shows, usually dealing with stories of unsolved mysteries, with a special concentration on extraterrestrial life and UFOs, which have now been rebranded as UAPs. For me, if Carl Sagan and Geraldo Rivera had a baby, it might be something like Jaime Maussan. People under a certain age might have to Google Geraldo Rivera. And then during his presentation, Señor Maussan did more than just talk about visitors from other worlds. He produced 2 bodies of what he called non-human life forms that were recovered from a mine in Peru. They were supposedly found between the cities of Palpa and Nazca in 2017. Now, if you're a regular listener of the Mysteries of Latin America podcast, you'll remember that not too long ago, one of our episodes was on the mystery of the Nazca lines. Hundreds of designs carved into the desert in the area of Nazca, Peru, where many speculate that they were either dug by alien visitors or done by the human inhabitants of the area centuries ago to communicate with extraterrestrials visiting the Earth. Now, if you haven't heard that episode, make sure to check it out right after this one. But back to the bodies. Maussan had some assistants open 2 brown boxes. Couldn't have been longer than a meter each, so about 3 feet and change. As they uncovered the boxes, he said this: "These bodies are the bodies of non-human beings that are not part of our earthly evolution." There was complete silence in the Chamber of Deputies. Inside the boxes were what looked to be very short, whitish gray, mummy-looking figures. So they looked like bones just barely covered by skin. They couldn't have been taller than 2 feet or 60 centimeters. Maussan then went on to say that the National Autonomous University of Mexico, which we know as UNAM here, conducted carbon-14 tests on the creatures, and determined them to be about 1,000 years old. He also said that these beings weren't being found in ancient alien aircraft crashes, but that they had been buried in these mines. The mines were mines for diatomaceous earth, a type of fossilized microalgae used as fertilizer, and Maussan said that since these beings were buried in the diatomaceous earth, that the material dried out, their dead bodies didn't allow for the growth of decomposing bacteria, and allowed for excellent preservation of their bodies. He stressed that these were not mummies, that they had become desiccated by the material they were buried in, and that their entire bodies were totally dried out, but intact. Maussan then brought on a co-presenter from Peru, Josh Mantilla, who went on to say that it wasn't just these two that were found near the enigmatic Nazca lines in the country, but that they found 20 such desiccated bodies. According to Mantilla, there are bodies that have sort of a reptilian, humanoid shape, with 3 fingers and an elongated head. He said that these remains were subject to testing by biologists, forensic experts, radiologists, biophysicists, geneticists, and that these remains belong to different species of extraterrestrial life forms that weren't known to science before they were discovered in 2015. And who else testified before the Mexican Congress as part of the event? Ryan Graves. Now, if that name sounds familiar, it's because Graves, a former F-18 pilot from the U.S., recently testified before the U.S. House of Representatives on the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena, known as UAPs, sightings and encounters that he and others in the military witnessed firsthand. In Mexico, Graves told his story about how he and his squadron detected unidentified aircraft while flying and other related incidents, and how the truth about his experience and the experience of others needs to be revealed. He also said that American authorities have aircraft and remains of a non-human origin in their possession, and was encouraged by Mexico's interest in the subject and bringing the truth to light. Jaime Maussan went on to say that Mexico has made significant strides in being more open about the possibility of unidentified aerial phenomena, and took an important step when the country released a video from the Mexican Air Force where infrared images showed the presence of 11 unidentified objects. It's still a mystery as to what those objects were, though. On Friday, September 15th, after the event, Jaime Maussan invited Reuters, the international news agency, to his offices and gave them exclusive access to come and inspect the alien bodies. And while they were there, Maussan gave the news agency another news bomb. One of the remains evidently was that of a female member of the alien species and was discovered to have eggs inside. And then, less than 24 hours after these presentations, things took an unexpected turn. Maussan faced a swift backlash and criticism from skeptics and people who questioned the authenticity of his presentations. But you might be surprised as to who the backlash came from. One of the first critics was former Navy pilot Ryan Graves himself. In a statement after the event, he shared about how he went to testify to promote government interest in pilot experiences with UAPs. Instead, he said that Maussan's unsubstantiated stunt of showing the 2 supposed alien remains were a step back for him and his cause. He felt blindsided by what others have called an alien sideshow. And you know who else wasn't 100% impressed? The same group that authenticated the age of the supposed alien remains. The National Autonomous University of Mexico, UNAM, sent out notice that Maussan was twisting the information on the carbon-14 tests they performed, saying that they were there just to date the material that was given to them, which they understood to be actually mummies, and not to speculate on their alien nature. And from the astronomy department at the same university, researcher Juliet Ferro said that this was a very sad situation for UNAM. Humanity has made very serious efforts to search for extraterrestrial life, and that the whole stunt no tiene ni pies ni cabeza in Spanish, which literally means that the whole thing doesn't have feet or a head. meaning it didn't make a lick of sense, adding that, as a scientist, I really can't trust someone who says that they've actually carried on a conversation with the Virgen de Guadalupe. After analyzing the data, she went on to add that the samples given to the university were brain and skin tissue samples, taken from different human mummies who died at different times. Things weren't looking good for the TV personality and his little group, but he defended his side of the story with conviction. On social media, Maussan repeated the story about the extensive DNA and carbon-14 test data he got from the National Autonomous University. Reuters, however, decided to ask to speak to an expert on those test results, and he concluded that those results showed that they were very much human beings from Earth. And while Mr. Maussan made it seem like the expert findings were directly related to the beings he brought in for show and tell, he did end up telling Reuters that those results were not directly related to the two bodies he showed, and that they have been conducted on a different body known under the nickname of Victoria, and that Victoria is still in Peru. You want to know who else is crying foul? Peru. The Peruvian Attorney General's office sent out a statement saying that in 2017 that the figures Jaime Maussan showed off as extraterrestrial were more like, and I quote, dolls manufactured recently that were covered with a mix of paper and synthetic glue to simulate the presence of human skin. Papier-mâché dolls, huh? They went on to say that to make the beings' insides, whoever made them used animal bones and then modified them to make them look more human. The Peruvian culture minister, Leslie Urteaga, is looking into the question of how the specimens, which she said were pre-Hispanic objects, left Peru in the first place, and said that a criminal complaint has now been filed. Maussan says he can't say how they made it into Mexico undetected, as he borrowed them from an unidentified Mexican man. That man was evidently at the exclusive exhibitions staged for Reuters, and while he refused to identify himself, he said all would be revealed at the appropriate time. Now do you understand the Geraldo Rivera reference I made earlier? This story is still very young, so coming to concrete conclusions about the events and their aftermath would be premature as the whole thing is still developing. But if we go on history, Maussan has made bizarre claims like this in the past, and then many of those claims were debunked. And as is common, especially in the internet age, people do seem to forget and move on to the next thing that's trending. By now here in Mexico, the whole thing has become a meme, and everybody's jumping on the dump on Jaime Maussan bandwagon and making fun of his papier-mâché art project. What do I think? For now, I think I'm going to side with Ryan Graves and the scientists at UNAM. For years, scientists have carefully and professionally researched the idea that we're not alone in the universe. But stunts like these can set the whole movement back in important ways by taking away their credibility. And now, there's a possible political angle to the whole thing too. Here in Mexico, the presidential elections are coming up soon, where a political party that's been in power for the last 6 years is looking to secure the next presidency. And many are saying that this is all part of a well-orchestrated distraction campaign to steal some of the fire from an up-and-coming presidential opposition candidate and getting people to waste time scrolling and posting on the spectacle of possible alien encounters. Stranger things have happened in the name of winning an election, no? But like I said, friends, the story is still young. So I'll keep an eye and an ear on it, and I'll update you with important developments one way or the other. Now, if you enjoy what we do here at the Mysteries of Latin America podcast, make sure to follow, subscribe, and tell the people in your life who might enjoy a good story about the surreal myths, legends, and mysteries of North, Central, and South America and the Caribbean. I thank you for listening and send everyone a big hola and gracias from Cancun. I'm Andrew Colon. Adios.